She was a widow, 3 children, no husband, no backup plan, just her 2 hands and her dignity. And her neighbor decided that even that was too much for her to have. She spent 3 years tearing down a woman who had done nothing to her. She never stopped to ask herself one question: what happens when God gets tired of watching? This is the story of a woman who had something to say about everything until the day life had something to say about her. Welcome back, besties. Aproko Street in Kumasi was the kind of place where people knew each other by name. Not just first names, full names, family names, the names of their children, the names of their problems. It was a tight street. Small compound houses sitting close together, shared walls, shared water, shared everything. And for 11 years, Abena had lived there without trouble. She was not a loud woman. She did not involve herself in other people's matters. Every morning she woke up before the sun, prepared her children for school, packed her fabric samples into a bag, and walked to the market. She sold fabric Ankara prints, plain cottons, anything people needed. It was not a big business, but it was hers. She had built it from nothing after her husband died, and it fed her family. People on Aproko Street respected Abena, not because she had money, but because she had character. When a neighbor fell sick, she sent food. When there was a naming ceremony, she showed up. When someone needed someone to talk to, her door was open. She was the kind of woman a community holds onto quietly, without making noise about it. Her 3 children, Kofi, Akosua, and baby Kwame, were her whole world. Kofi was 12, serious and responsible beyond his age. Akosua was 9, bright and full of questions. Kwame was 5, still soft and unaware that life had already handed his family a heavy load. Abena carried that load every single day without complaint. Then one dry season morning, a moving truck parked in front of the empty house next door, and everything changed. Her name was Gifty, but the street would soon stop calling her by name and start calling her by reputation. She arrived with plenty of boxes, a sharp tongue, and an opinion about everything she laid her eyes on. She was a woman in her mid-50s, heavy-set, always dressed like she was going somewhere important even when she was just standing at her own gate. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never once been wrong about anything, at least not in her own mind. The first week she arrived, she knocked on Abena's door. Abena opened it with a smile. "Welcome to the street. I am Abena. If you need anything, please do not hesitate." Auntie Gifty looked her up and down slowly. Then she looked past her into the house. Then she looked at the children playing in the compound. 3 children and no husband, she said. Not as a question, as a judgment. Abena kept her smile. "My husband passed. But we are doing well. Thank you for asking." Auntie Gifty made a sound, not quite a word, not quite silence, and walked away. That was day 1. By the end of the first month, Auntie Gifty had already made herself the most talked about person on Aproko Street. She stood at her gate every evening like it was a throne. She commented on whoever walked past. She called out to neighbors across the street to share information nobody had asked for. She was loud. She was everywhere. And she never, not once, ran out of things to say. At first, people laughed it off. "Every street has one," they said. "She will settle down." She did not settle down. It started small. Auntie Gifty told the landlord that Abena's children were destroying the fence on the east side of the compound. The landlord checked. There was nothing wrong with the fence, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then, she told a woman at the market that Abena's fabric business was struggling badly, that Abena owed money to suppliers and could not pay. It was a lie, a complete and total lie. But markets are places where words travel fast and truth travels slow. Some customers started going elsewhere without even asking Abena directly. Then came the worst one. Auntie Gifty told 3 women from the church that Abena was receiving men in her home late at night. That as a widow, she was living carelessly and setting a bad example for her children. She said it with concern in her voice, the way people deliver poison with a kind face. The church women talked. The story grew legs. By the time it got back to Abena, it had turned into something she did not even recognize. Abena was devastated. She had done nothing. She had not looked at Auntie Gifty sideways, had not spoken badly about her, had not touched anything that belonged to her. She could not understand what she had done to deserve this treatment. One evening, she walked to Auntie Gifty's door. She knocked. She stood straight, kept her voice low and said, "Auntie Gifty, I do not know what I have done to you, but whatever it is, tell me so we can settle it like adults. I have children to raise. I cannot have my name dragged through these streets." Auntie Gifty looked at her. Then she laughed. A short, dismissive laugh. "You are too known," she said. "Go from my door." And she shot it in Abena's face. Abena stood there for a moment. Then she turned and walked back to her house. She sat in her kitchen after the children slept, and she cried quietly so nobody would hear. Not because she was weak, but because she was human, and being treated with cruelty for no reason by someone who should have been a neighbor hurt in a way that was hard to explain. But she got up the next morning. She opened her shop. She kept going. 3 months later, Abena's business had dropped by almost half. The rumors had done their work. Some customers felt uncomfortable. Some had simply moved on. The church women kept a polite but cold distance. Even some neighbors on the street started treating her differently, not rude, but cautious. The way people treat someone when they are not sure what to believe. The landlord called her one afternoon. He told her he had been hearing things, that if any of it was true, he would have a problem renewing her rent agreement at the end of the year. He said it carefully, like a man who did not want trouble. But the message was clear. Abena went home and looked at her 3 children eating dinner. Kofi was helping Kwame with his food. Akosua was reading a school book under the lamp. They did not know what was happening. They were just children, living their lives, trusting their mother to hold everything together. Abena looked at them and made a decision. She would not fight Auntie Gifty with words. She would not go back and forth on that street like a market dispute. She would work harder, live cleaner, and trust that what was done in darkness would not stay hidden forever. She did not know how right she was. His name was Emmanuel. He was a quiet man, around 40 years old, who moved into a rented room at the far end of Troublesome Street on a Thursday afternoon. Nobody paid him much attention. He greeted people politely, kept to himself, and went about his business without noise. He worked as a records clerk at a government office in the city center. But Emmanuel had not come to Troublesome Street by accident. He had grown up hearing about that street. His grandmother had spoken about it her whole life, about a plot of land that had been in their family for generations, land that had been taken. Through a fraudulent sale years ago, when the family was scattered and grieving after a death, she had died without getting justice. But she had kept every document, every original paper, every receipt, every record of ownership going back decades. Emmanuel had inherited those documents, and when a routine government survey brought Troublesome Street to his attention, he recognized the address immediately. He moved in. He said nothing. He watched. And within 2 weeks of living on that street, he had already identified which house sat on his family's land. It was Auntie Gifty's. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where the air is still cool and the street is just waking up. Children walking to school. Women setting up their morning routines. The smell of breakfast from open kitchens. Auntie Gifty was standing at her gate the way she always did, watching the street like it was her personal television. A government vehicle turned onto Troublesome Street slowly. It parked directly in front of her house. 2 officials stepped out, both in uniform, both carrying files. A 3rd man stepped out behind them. It was Emmanuel. The officials walked to Auntie Gifty's gate. "Are you Madam Gifty?" one of them asked. "Yes," she said, still confident, still unbothered. What is it? The official opened his file. We are from the Lands Commission. We have an active dispute filed against this property. The claim is that this land was sold to you through a transaction, and the original ownership documents belong to another family. We are here to serve you formal notice and begin the verification process. The street had gone completely quiet. Doors were opening. Heads were appearing. People who had been inside were now standing still, watching. Auntie Gifty's mouth opened. Then it closed. Then it opened again. But nothing came out. For the first time in 3 years, not a single word. She looked at the file. She saw her name. She saw the land registration number. She saw Emmanuel standing behind the officials, looking at her calmly, without anger, without triumph, just looking. Her hands started to shake. The case moved quickly. Emmanuel's documents were thorough and clean. The family's original ownership records were verified by the Lands Commission within weeks. The man who had sold the land to Auntie Gifty had done so without any legal right. He had forged documents and collected her money and disappeared years before she even moved in. Auntie Gifty had been deceived, but that did not change the legal outcome. The property was frozen. She could not sell it. She could not rent it. She could not do anything with it while the case was active. Her savings started going toward legal fees. Her daughter abroad, who had always sent money monthly, called one evening after hearing the full story and told her mother she needed to think carefully about continuing to support a situation built on dishonesty. The calls stopped coming. The neighbors who had laughed with Auntie Gifty, who had listened to her stories about Abena and nodded along, who had entertained her gossip, those same people now had nothing to offer her. They were polite. They were not enemies. But they were not going to stand in the fire with her either. She was alone. She sat in that house day after day. The same house that was now at the center of a legal battle, and the silence was heavier than anything she had ever carried. The street she had stood on like a queen now felt like it was watching her fall. 3 weeks into the legal process, Auntie Gifty fell ill. Not a serious illness, but stress and shame and loneliness have a way of sitting on the body. She stopped eating properly. She stopped going out. Her light was off more often than it was on. Pastor Mensah from the neighborhood church was not a man who waited for people to deserve his attention before he gave it. He heard that Auntie Gifty was unwell, and he went to her door. He knocked. She almost did not open it. But something, maybe exhaustion, maybe loneliness, made her turn the handle. He came in. He sat down. He did not preach. He did not lecture. He just sat with her in that quiet house, and after a long silence, he asked her one simple question. "Gifty, why are you like this?" Something broke inside her. She tried to hold it. She pressed her lips together and looked away. But the question had touched something she had buried so deep, she had almost forgotten it was there. And then she talked. She talked about growing up with nothing, in a family where other relatives had everything. About watching cousins go to good schools while she stayed behind. About working hard her whole life and feeling like the world was giving everyone else a head start she never received. She talked about her marriage, about a husband who had married her and then spent years making her feel small, who cheated openly, who mocked her in front of people, who finally left her for a woman half her age and told her on his way out that she had never been enough. She had loved that man completely, and he had returned it with humiliation. She talked about watching other women like Abena, carry their pain quietly and still smile, still move forward, still have people love them. And how that smile, that peace, that ability to keep going had made something dark rise up in her chest. She had not understood it then. She understood it now. She had been jealous. Not of Abena's money. Abena had no money. Not of her beauty, but of her peace, of the fact that Abena had been broken by life and had refused to become bitter. And Auntie Gifty, who had also been broken by life, had chosen bitterness instead, had fed it, nurtured it, let it grow until it became the loudest thing about her. She had attacked Abena because Abena's peace reminded her of everything she had lost and never recovered. Pastor Mensah listened to all of it. Then he said quietly, "The pain you carried was real. What was done to you was wrong. But you took that wrong and you passed it on to someone who had nothing to do with it. And now you have to choose. Do you want to keep carrying this, or do you want to put it down?" Auntie Gifty sat in that chair and cried like she had not cried in 20 years. She asked Pastor Mensah to help her gather the neighbors. It took 2 days. Some people were hesitant. Some were curious. Some came because they genuinely wanted to see what would happen. They stood in the compound, the same compound where Auntie Gifty had held court for 3 years, commenting on everyone's lives. She stood in front of them without her usual posture. No folded arms. No lifted chin. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but something about her had come down. She looked at Abena first. Abena stood with Kofi beside her, her hand on his shoulder. Auntie Gifty's voice was steady but low. "Abena, I told lies about you. I went to the market and I used my mouth to destroy what you were building. I went to the church and I damaged your name among women who should have been your sisters. I went to your landlord and I planted doubt in his mind about a woman who had done nothing wrong. I did all of this because you had peace and I did not. Because you were surviving without a man and I had been destroyed by one. I was wrong. I am deeply sorry." Abena looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I forgive you," she said. Just that. No speech, no drama. Just those 3 words, spoken with the same quiet dignity she had carried through all of it. Auntie Gifty then turned to the landlord, to the market women who were present, to the church members, to the neighbors who had listened to her gossip. She apologized to each group, not with excuses, not with explanations, just with ownership. She said what she had done, and she said she was sorry. Some people forgave her on the spot, others nodded without a word. A few needed more time, and that was their right. But everyone heard her. And on that street, in that compound, something shifted. The land case concluded 4 months later. The court ruled in Emmanuel's family's favor. Auntie Gifty was given a period of time to vacate the property. She lost the house. She lost the money she had paid for it. She lost years. But something she had carried for even longer, she also finally put down. She moved to a smaller place on the other side of Kumasi. She started attending a different church, not to hide, but to start fresh. She was quieter now, not silent, but measured. Careful with words, the way someone is careful after they have seen what words can destroy. Abena's business recovered. Slowly at first, one customer returning, then another. The landlord renewed her agreement without question. The church women came back around. The street returned to what it had always been before Auntie Gifty arrived, not perfect, but decent, neighborly. Abena never spoke badly about Auntie Gifty after that day in the compound. When people asked, she said simply, she was hurting. Hurting people hurt people. But she faced it. That takes courage. That was Abena. Even at the end, she found something human to hold on to. Moral lesson of this story. Before we close, there is something important to take from this story. Auntie Gifty was not born a bad woman. She was a woman who went through real pain, betrayal, humiliation, loneliness, and never healed from it. Instead of dealing with that pain honestly, she turned it outward. She made other people pay for wounds they did not cause. This is more common than we admit. Many people walking around today, hurting others, spreading rumors, pulling people down, they are not evil. They are broken and they do not know how to fix themselves, so they break everything around them instead. But here is what Auntie Gifty's story teaches us. Unhealed pain does not stay still. It moves. It finds people. It destroys things. And at the end of it all, the person carrying that pain is still the one left empty. You cannot build a good life on a broken foundation, not in land and not in character. And karma, quiet, patient, unhurried karma, does not forget. It does not rush, but it always arrives. If you are carrying pain today, deal with it. Speak to someone. Pray. Seek help. Face it honestly. Because the alternative is becoming the kind of person who makes everyone around them smaller, and that is a lonely, costly way to live. And if someone like Auntie Gifty has hurt you, hold your peace. Keep building. Keep going. Because your quiet endurance is not weakness. It is the kind of strength that time always rewards. This has been today's story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new here, welcome. This is a place where real stories teach real lessons. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.